They called him the rebel prophet, a man who spoke his truth even when the world wasn't ready to listen. A voice so powerful, it became both a weapon and a shield. He was not just a musician, he was a movement. The world knew him as Peter Tosh. But before the legend, there was Winston Hubert McIntosh, a boy born into struggle, destined to set the world on fire with rhythm, rebellion, and righteousness. The sound of drums and distant hymns filled the Jamaican air when he came into this world on October the 19th, 1944. Born in the rural parish of Westmoreland, Jamaica, his beginnings were as humble as the soil that raised him. A place where children played barefoot through the fields, where poverty was a way of life, and where music was medicine for the soul. From the start, young Winston was different. He wasn't afraid to speak up, even to elders. He had a sharp tongue and sharper wit. While other children learned to obey, Tosh learned to question. He questioned authority. He questioned inequality. He questioned why the rich had everything while the poor had only faith. He never knew his father. His mother left when he was just a child. So he was raised by his aunt, a woman of strength, a woman of discipline, but also one who couldn't fully understand the burning fire in his heart. The loneliness of growing up without his parents created in him a deep sense of self-reliance, a belief that no one would fight for him, so he must fight for himself. In the Jamaican countryside, music was everywhere. Church choirs echoed through the hills every Sunday morning, and though Tosh sat in the pews, his mind drifted to the rhythm of life outside. The wind in the trees, the buzz of crickets, the pulse of the earth. That was his first teacher, the natural sound of life itself. He built his first guitar from scrapwood and wire. It didn't look like much, a few strings nailed to a board, but it was enough to make music. And from that moment, he knew music was his destiny. It wasn't about fame or money, it was about expression, truth in sound. By his teenage years, the quiet countryside could no longer contain him. He dreamed of Kingston, Jamaica's capital, where opportunity and danger walked hand in hand. So, like many before him, he packed his dreams and boarded a bus toward Trenchtown, a place where music, struggle, and faith would collide to create history. Trenchtown was no paradise. It was a place of overcrowded homes, unemployment, and constant police pressure. But it was also the birthplace of something magical, a community where talent thrived despite hardship. Every corner had a singer, a poet, or a dreamer. It was there, in the heart of Kingston's ghettos, that Peter Tosh's story truly began. He was tall, proud, and full of attitude. His voice was deep, commanding, and unlike anyone else's. He stood out, not just for his height, but for his energy. People said, "That youth has something in him." And they were right. It was in Trenchtown where destiny introduced him to two young men who would forever change the world of music. Robert Nesta Marley and Neville Bunny Livingston, later known as Bunny Wailer. The three bonded instantly. They were poor, hungry, and hopeful, united by the same love for sound and the same belief that music could break chains. Together they practiced for hours, sometimes singing into the night with nothing but moonlight and dreams to guide them. They harmonized like brothers. They wrote songs about survival, unity, and the everyday life of the Jamaican people. They believed their voices could speak for the voiceless. And so the Wailers were born, not just a group, a movement, a message set to melody. Their songs carried the pain and pride of the ghetto. But Peter Tosh wasn't content to simply sing pretty words. He wanted to challenge the world. His lyrics were sharper, more defiant. While Marley sang of peace and love, Tosh sang of justice and resistance. He was the iron fist in the velvet glove of reggae. The early days were tough. They recorded songs like Simmer Down, Rude Boy, and One Love, local hits that spoke to the struggles of youth in Jamaica. But behind the harmony, tension simmered. Peter's strong personality often clashed with producers and radio men who didn't like his militancy. He refused to soften his tone or his message. He was not interested in being polite, he wanted to be heard. The Wailers' popularity grew fast, and so did the pressure. Island Records saw potential and offered them a deal. But Tosh quickly realized the business was not fair. Money wasn't coming evenly. Decisions were made without consultation. He felt exploited, disrespected, and dismissed. Yet through it all, his voice remained powerful. Songs like Get Up, Stand Up carried his signature, a bold cry for freedom and equality. Even when he wasn't the frontman, his presence was undeniable. As the fame of the Wailers grew, so did the divide among them. Bob Marley was becoming a global icon, calm, spiritual, and diplomatic. Bunny Wailer leaned toward mysticism and withdrawal from the spotlight. And Peter Tosh, he wanted revolution, he wanted truth, he wanted action. He said, "I am not a background singer, I am a leader." And with that conviction, he walked away. Leaving the Wailers was not an act of ego, it was an act of identity. Peter Tosh was ready to build his own legacy, on his own terms. He would no longer sing for anyone's approval. He would sing for the people and for freedom. He stepped out of the shadows and into his destiny. The next chapter of his life would shock the world. It would bring controversy, glory, and tragedy. But most of all, it would bring truth, unfiltered and unafraid. Because Peter Tosh was not born to entertain, he was born to awaken. When Peter Tosh walked away from the Wailers, the world thought he'd fade into the shadows. But he didn't fade, he flared. He wasn't built to blend in. He was built to stand out, to confront, to challenge every system that silenced truth. He was done being a harmony singer. He was ready to be a movement of one. It was the mid-1970s. Reggae was rising, Jamaica was restless, and revolution was in the air. Peter Tosh knew the time had come to speak without restraint, and when his first solo album hit the streets, the world wasn't ready for the storm he unleashed. Legalize it. Two words that would define a generation and ignite a cultural war. When that song dropped in 1976, it wasn't just music, it was a manifesto. A bold cry for justice, for freedom, for truth. Tosh sang what millions thought but were afraid to say. Legalize it, don't criticize it. The message was simple but radical. He wasn't just calling for marijuana legalization, he was demanding respect for Rastafari culture, for the rights of the oppressed, for the dignity of choice. In a society where the ganja plant was demonized and its users criminalized, Peter Tosh stood on stage with a spliff in hand, daring the world to arrest him for his beliefs. The establishment called him dangerous. The people called him brave. And the youth? They called him hero. Legalize It became a cultural anthem. It echoed from Kingston's ghettos to New York's college dorms, from London's underground clubs to the streets of Africa. But Tosh wasn't chasing commercial fame, he was spreading enlightenment. He believed ganja was sacred, a plant of peace and meditation. To him, criminalizing it was not just ignorance, it was oppression. The album was raw, real, and revolutionary. Songs like Why Must I Cry, Igzia Beher, Let Jah Be Praised, and Till Your Well Runs Dry revealed a man of deep faith and deep pain. Every lyric carried his philosophy. Freedom through truth, healing through faith, and rebellion through love. But with success came conflict. Governments banned his songs, radio stations refused to play his music. Some promoters cancelled shows, calling him too militant. But Peter Tosh wore that word like a badge of honor. He said, "I am not violent, I am militant. Militant means to stand firm for what you believe." And stand firm he did. While others sang about peace, Tosh sang about equality. While others talked about unity, he demanded justice. He became the fire reggae needed, the unapologetic side of the truth. Then came his second masterpiece, Equal Rights. Released in 1977, it was not just an album, it was a revolution in rhythm. From the first beat to the final echo, it spoke directly to the oppressed, the poor, the forgotten. Everyone is crying out for peace, none is crying out for justice. Those words hit like thunder, they shook the world awake. Equal Rights wasn't a record you danced to, it was a record you listened to and thought about. It was raw, it was bold, and it was fearless. Songs like African, Down Presser Man, and Get Up, Stand Up tore through colonial hypocrisy like a blade through silk. Peter Tosh wasn't asking for permission to speak, he was demanding it. His performances became more than concerts, they were spiritual revolutions. When Tosh walked on stage, with his staff of righteousness in one hand and his guitar in the other, you could feel the air shift. He didn't just play music, he preached it. Each show was an awakening. He wore his dreadlocks like a crown. He carried himself like a king of truth. And his message? That every man, woman, and child deserved equality, freedom, and respect. As reggae began to dominate the global scene, Tosh became one of its fiercest ambassadors. He toured the world, bringing his message to audiences who had never heard such raw honesty before. From the United States to Europe, from Africa to Asia, his concerts drew thousands. He didn't perform for applause, he performed for awakening. He often said, "Music is my weapon," and he meant it. Every note he played, every lyric he sang carried a purpose: to educate, to liberate, to provoke thought. But fame didn't make him soft. He remained defiant, against Babylon, against corruption, against hypocrisy. He criticized governments for exploiting the poor. He challenged the police for oppressing the people. He even called out religious leaders who profited from fear. His fearlessness made him both respected and feared. He was invited to major stages, but he used those platforms not to entertain, but to expose. One of his most legendary moments came at the 1978 One Love Peace concert in Kingston. It was meant to be a night of unity, a concert calling for an end to Jamaica's political violence. But when Peter Tosh stepped on stage, he turned it into a sermon. He lit a spliff right there, in front of the Prime Minister and opposition leader, and began to speak truth to power. He scolded the politicians for their hypocrisy, their corruption, their lies. He told them the people didn't need their false peace. They needed justice. His voice roared across the crowd, "Peace is the diploma you get in the cemetery." That night, he risked everything, his career, his safety, his life, to tell the truth. And that's what made Peter Tosh unforgettable. He wasn't afraid of death, he was afraid of silence. His activism attracted both fans and enemies. He was arrested multiple times, beaten by police, and monitored by authorities. But nothing stopped him. Each beating made him stronger, each arrest made him bolder, each injustice fueled his mission. By the early 1980s, Peter Tosh had become a global revolutionary, a symbol of courage, resistance, and uncompromising truth. He collaborated with international artists, including Mick Jagger, on the hit single, "You Gotta Walk, Don't Look Back." That song brought him into the global mainstream, but even then he refused to be tamed. When journalists asked him why he was always angry, Tosh replied, "I am not angry, I am conscious." He didn't want to be loved by everyone, he wanted to be understood. Through his lyrics, his interviews, and his performances, he taught millions to think critically, to look beyond propaganda, to question authority, to believe in self-liberation. He was more than a reggae star. He was a prophet of equality, a revolutionary wrapped in rhythm, a voice that refused to be silenced. As the 1980s dawned, Peter Tosh stood tall as one of reggae's strongest voices, not just in sound, but in spirit. The world had begun to recognize what Jamaica already knew. Peter Tosh was not a man who followed trends. He created movements. His music wasn't made for charts or awards. It was made for the soul, for every man and woman who had ever felt silenced, oppressed, or forgotten. But even those who once dismissed him began to realize this man was more than a rebel. He was a visionary. Across the globe, his message spread. Students, activists, and freedom fighters played his songs like anthems of truth. In South Africa, young people facing apartheid found strength in his words. In America, civil rights leaders quoted his lyrics. In Africa, people called him the voice of the diaspora, a messenger of African unity. Peter Tosh believed in Africa deeply. He saw it not just as a place, but as a spiritual homeland for all black people. He said, "Africa is not just a continent, Africa is a state of mind." He called for unity among black nations, for education, for liberation. He sang, "Don't care where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African." It was more than a lyric. It was a declaration of identity and pride. And as his influence grew, so did his recognition. He toured the world from Europe to North America, Africa to Asia, electrifying audiences with his fierce energy and fearless message. His concerts were powerful spiritual experiences. When he stepped on stage, barefoot, dreadlocks flowing, eyes blazing with conviction, you felt like you were witnessing a prophet in motion. Each performance carried a message that freedom was not given, it was claimed. He shouted truth into the microphone as though the world itself depended on it. And for many it did. Even his peers in reggae saw him as a teacher. Artists like Burning Spear, Dennis Brown, and later generations, Damian Marley, Protégé, and Chronix, all drew from the fire he started. They admired his courage to challenge injustice head-on. Peter Tosh was the warrior many wanted to be, but few dared to become. Then, in 1987, after years of struggle and exile, Peter Tosh released what would become his final album, No Nuclear War. It was his most global message yet, a cry against the arms race, nuclear weapons, and the growing greed of world powers. Once again, he sang not for himself, but for humanity. The album earned him international acclaim, and later that year, Peter Tosh won a Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album. It was a long overdue recognition for a man who had given everything to truth and justice through music. But for Tosh, awards meant little. He didn't measure success in trophies, he measured it in transformation, in how many minds his message could reach. In interviews, he often said, "I don't make music for entertainment, I make music for enlightenment." Behind the firebrand image, Peter Tosh was also a deeply spiritual man. He prayed daily, he believed in natural living, eat-all food, meditation, the healing power of herbs. He respected life in all its forms. He saw himself as a messenger chosen by Jah to speak for the voiceless. His personal life, however, was filled with both love and struggle. He had several relationships and children whom he loved dearly, though fame often kept him away from home. He was a father who taught his children to be proud, to think freely, and to never bow to oppression. Though he could afford comfort, Tosh never lived for luxury. He preferred simplicity, a humble home in Jamaica surrounded by music, nature, and community. He owned nice cars, yes, but his true wealth was in wisdom. He often gave money to those in need, helped struggling musicians, and supported grassroots projects across the island. People in Jamaica called him the Bush Doctor, a man of healing and truth. And indeed, his 1978 album of the same name became a classic. Songs like Bush Doctor, Moses, The Prophet, and Stand Firm reflected his unwavering faith in righteousness. Yet being outspoken came at a price. Peter Tosh's truth made him powerful, but it also made him a target. The authorities saw him as a threat. He was harassed, beaten, and arrested multiple times. Police raided his home, smashed his instruments, and tried to silence him, but nothing could crush his spirit. He said, "You can beat the body, but you can't beat the spirit." Still, the constant tension took a toll. Jamaica was changing, violence was rising, and the same system Tosh fought against seemed to grow even stronger. But he refused to leave. He believed Jamaica needed him. His people needed his voice. Then came the night that would change everything. September 11th, 1987. It was supposed to be a quiet evening at his home in Kingston. Peter Tosh was with friends, relaxing, celebrating life, when tragedy struck. 3 men entered his home, men he knew, men he had helped before. They came, they said, for money. What happened next was chaos. Voices raised, guns drawn, and in the blink of an eye, shots fired. When the smoke cleared, Peter Tosh lay on the ground, lifeless. The rebel prophet was gone. The news spread like wildfire. Fans across Jamaica and around the world cried in disbelief. How could a man who stood for peace and justice be taken so violently? His funeral drew thousands, musicians, politicians, and everyday people. They sang his songs through tears, turning mourning into movement. And even in death, Peter Tosh remained defiant. He was buried with his guitar, his Bible, and a chalice, symbols of his faith, his art, and his freedom. They took his life, but they could not kill his message. Because Peter Tosh never belonged to one moment in time, he belonged to the eternal fight for justice. Years later, his music still speaks loudly, perhaps louder than ever. In an age where oppression still exists, where voices are still silenced, Peter Tosh's words echo through generations. Equal rights and justice for all. Legalize it. Don't look back. His influence can be felt in every reggae artist who dares to tell the truth, in every activist who refuses to be silent, and in every listener who chooses consciousness over comfort. Peter Tosh was not perfect. He was human, raw, fearless, flawed, and real, but that's exactly what made him divine. He turned his pain into poetry, his anger into art, his rebellion into rhythm. And today, decades after his passing, his spirit still marches, in the sound of reggae, in the voice of revolution, in the heart of every soul who believes in freedom. He once said, "I am the toughest, I am the rock, I am the foundation." And indeed, he was. Peter Tosh wasn't just part of reggae. He was one of its pillars, a prophet who lived and died for truth, a man who turned music into a weapon of liberation. His journey from the fields of Westmoreland to the world's greatest stages remains a testament to courage, conviction, and creativity. And though he's gone, his fire still burns, because true rebels never die, they multiply. Peter Tosh, the rebel prophet, the bush doctor, the voice of the voiceless. His message lives forever. Peter Tosh may have left the physical world, but his spirit never left the stage. His music, his message, and his fearless defiance continue to resonate across generations, continents, and cultures. After his tragic death in 1987, tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Fans, fellow musicians, and activists mourned the loss of a man who had been more than a singer. He had been a mentor, a teacher, a prophet. Songs once considered controversial became timeless anthems. Legalize It became a global call for cannabis reform. Equal rights became a rallying cry for social justice and human dignity. Get Up, Stand Up inspired movements from Kingston to Johannesburg, from London to New York. Peter Tosh's influence on reggae cannot be overstated. He shaped the sound, philosophy, and political message of the genre. He transformed reggae from music into a tool for consciousness. And he taught future generations that art and activism are inseparable. Artists continue to honor his legacy. From Damian Marley to Chronix, from Protage to Kabaka Pyramid, reggae performers carry his fire in their lyrics, rhythms, and stage presence. Each generation learns anew from Tosh's uncompromising dedication to truth and justice. His life also reminds the world of the price of speaking truth. He challenged governments, questioned authority, and refused to compromise his beliefs. That courage came at a cost, but it also ensured that his message would endure. Peter Tosh showed that music can be revolutionary, that rhythm can be rebellion, and that words can be weapons of liberation. Today, his image adorns murals in Kingston and museums across the world. Documentaries, biographies, and tributes celebrate his life, ensuring that the rebel prophet is never forgotten. Rastafari communities remember him not only as a musician, but as a spiritual warrior. Every time his songs play, his philosophy echoes: stand firm, speak truth, demand equality. Peter Tosh's words remain as relevant today as they were decades ago. I am the rock, I am the foundation, I am the strongest. He built a foundation that will never crumble. His life was a testament to courage, creativity, and conscience. And while the man may be gone, the revolution he started marches on. In a world still plagued by inequality, injustice, and oppression, Peter Tosh's voice continues to guide, inspire, and awaken. He reminds us that one person, armed with truth and talent, can change the world. He reminds us that silence is never the answer. He reminds us that music can be mightier than fear. And so, as the sun sets over Kingston, as the echoes of dreadlocks swinging in rhythm fade into memory, one thing remains undeniable. Peter Tosh lived fully. Peter Tosh spoke boldly. Peter Tosh rebelled relentlessly. And Peter Tosh will never be silenced. He lives in every protest, every conscious lyric, and every heart that refuses to bow to oppression. He is eternal. He is the voice of the voiceless. He is Peter Tosh, the rebel prophet of reggae. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful biographies of the world's biggest icons.